Insurance professionals work hard every day to keep people safe, but as technology transforms the industry, how can insurers protect not only their clients, but also shield themselves from ever-changing cyber risks? My name's Elizabeth Blossfield, and I'm the host of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, a monthly look into how the world of cyber and the business of insurance are connected. AI is rapidly changing the way businesses operate, but as companies embrace increasingly autonomous AI systems, they're also confronting a new and evolving set of risks. In this episode of the Insuring Cyber Podcast, we're looking at what happens when an AI agent doesn't just generate information, but takes action on its own. We'll discuss the recent OpenAI incident in which AI models reportedly broke out of an isolated testing environment and accessed another AI platform, and what the event can teach insurers about the risks of agentic AI. I'm joined by Jeff Kulikowski, Executive Vice President and Head of Cyber and E&O at Westfield Specialty Insurance, to explore how these incidents differ from traditional cyber attacks, whether companies are moving fast enough on AI governance and guardrails, and how underwriters can adapt the questions that they ask about AI use. We'll also look at the role insurers can play in helping clients manage these emerging risks. Check out our conversation. Hi, Jeff. It's great to be speaking with you today. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to speak with me. I think this is a really important and timely topic for our listeners, so I'm excited to dive into it with you. And I know that everybody, I'm sure, has been following the news, but could you just kind of start off giving an overview of what happened with OpenAI's AI incident and why it caught so much attention initially?
Sure. Yeah. To keep it brief, because it's such an interesting happenstance that I can go on forever about this, but to keep it brief, so OpenAI, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, revealed that some of their models that they were using for an internal cybersecurity test broke out of the isolated sandbox environment. Without direction, had accessed the internet autonomously through I believe it was a certain vulnerability, I can't remember which one, and then hacked into the infrastructure of another AI platform called Hugging Face to find answers to a test pool. So that's it at a very basic level. But what everybody seems to be so focused on is not just how this happened, but why. And why we should all be surprised that it happened or why we shouldn't. But it was I think the first instance of its kind, and it truly did highlight some of the exposures that you find with an agentic AI approach or an agentic AI model when utilizing.
Yeah. Thanks for that overview. It's really interesting because, agentic AI is sort of the new buzzword in the industry, and there's a lot of talk about the opportunities with it, but it is important to be aware of some of the risks as well. And I'm curious, from an insurance perspective, what makes this type of event different from a traditional cyber attack?
There were no people. Number one, that is probably the biggest component. But what makes it so interesting and newsworthy is that it in one fell swoop was able to highlight to the broader market and whoever was reading this that there are risks associated with an agentic AI model, and so there's a rush to implement AI, whether using it internally or externally. Everybody's talking about how it can change their platform, their services, their products, but we don't often hear examples of what the risks may be. And specific to an agentic AI model, this is a case where the AI agent was given a task and operated along the guardrails given to it. And so to me, and I think to broader, we certainly talk about this at Westfield a lot, is it really does highlight the level of specificity needed when using an AI agent versus, say, an AI model gone rogue. And so that's what's just so interesting here is people are talking about this as like, oh, it could be a rogue AI agent. It wasn't rogue. It was doing what it was told. But there weren't guardrails, as far as I know, there weren't guardrails provided to the agent itself that said, hey, maybe don't hack into another AI model, or don't hack into somewhere else, or don't go external. It was given a task, and then at its core did what it thought was the best way to accomplish that task. So it's kind of like yelling at your child for getting an A, even though they cheated. It's like, well, you didn't tell me not to cheat. And I know most parents would say that, but it really was a lack, I think, of oversight of the actual model itself, because it completed the task, but it just didn't do it in the way that was seen fit, and it certainly caused a potential third-party issue. So from an insurance perspective, it just raises so many questions about, what are the guardrails provided? Are there, how does each company work along these guardrails? How do they establish them? What are they utilizing an agentic approach for? Is it, and so it creates so many questions. And what makes it so uniquely different is that we're used to working through ransom demands from various bad actors located across the world, and we're negotiating often with humans. And so they're utilizing AI technology to make their scans more rapid and to make their approach more rapid. But still, at the base of it, we're dealing with humans. We're negotiating with them, or we're trying to find ways either to rebuild or pay the ransom. I'm not sure what the ransom would be in a case of an AI model or an agentic AI, hacking into a system. It could just completely change the dynamic of how we approach this business, especially, trying to understand exactly, how the agent is being restricted or granted the benefit in their approach.
Yeah, and that's such an important point as well, because we talk a lot in this podcast about training AI models and the data that goes into it, and how there has to be so much specificity, as you said, in training the models and in giving them directives, because they're just, as you said, they're doing what they're told. And if it's too general, then it can lead to mistakes or gaps. And are you seeing companies thinking, I know you mentioned that there's a big rush to adopt AI. You're definitely feeling it in insurance as well. Are you seeing companies thinking about these risks enough, or do you think there are companies that are adopting AI faster than they're governing it?
I mean, yes to both questions. So we know that our insureds are, especially our public company insureds, are certainly having to look at this a bit deeper because of some of the reputational issues that can come about from any larger issues. But yeah, we're seeing across the board, our insureds really thinking about how they want to implement AI, how they want to utilize it, again, whether externally or internally, and within those two avenues, like what exactly it's going to be doing and how it's going to be working. So we have seen it, and we've seen more and more of our insureds have specific AI charters or AI guidelines for internal use, for vendor usage. So we're seeing a huge ramp up of controls around it. And that's, the funny part is you're not just seeing it in cyber, you're seeing it in other professional liability lines, including lawyers' professional liability, accountants' professional liability. I would assume we're doing the same thing on property and other first party lines, because it is impacting every line of insurance. But so even though we're seeing more of it, do I think it's enough? No. I don't know that you can ever be too specific. I mean, we've seen how trading algorithms can go wrong. And that's been happening for 15, 20 years. And so we knew that this could happen with an agentic approach. But what did that require for the algorithms of the early 2000s to get better? More specificity, more guardrails, more scenario planning, things like that. And my bigger concern, and this certainly isn't with all of our insureds, but our biggest concern, certainly at Westfield, or I think the broader cyber and professional liability market, is the speed to market more important than the controls around it. So how quickly do you need to get a product out? How quickly do you need to build out a new operating unit or a new AI platform without thinking about some of the consequences? And so, we're imploring our insureds to pay attention to new regulations coming about around utilization or intellectual property. We're pushing them to be as specific as possible around the approach, why, how, planning, Q&A, things like that. So, but there's always that push and pull, Elizabeth, that concerns us of like, are they willing to forego controls and risk in order to get the platform out faster than 5 of their competitors? So that's something that we're always having to underwrite to.
Right. Yeah. And I know you mentioned earlier in the conversation that this has the opportunity to really change the way that insurance operates moving forward. So for insureds or companies that are using AI agents, what questions are you seeing underwriters asking that they might not have been asking, like a year ago, or how have things changed in that regard?
I mean, in terms of specific questions, we see quite a few, and this has been our approach at Westfield for probably 9 months now, 10 months. So we're trying to get very low, kind of take a bottom up approach of understanding what models you're using. First of all, are you using a private model, which is not as likely, or a public model? If utilizing a public model, what are you using it for specifically? And more so, are you aware of the deficiencies and the benefits of each model and making sure that they match with the strategy that you're trying to deploy? And after that, a lot of it's about regulation and understanding, how up to date are they with new regulations in any given state, since they operate, 40% of their revenue there, 70% of the revenue, whatever it may be. The unfortunate part, Elizabeth, is unlike a cyber questionnaire where you can, a small business application can get through 20 questions, 10 questions, and they're all kind of the same. They're all focused on MFA, patching cadence, things like that. With AI, since it's still fairly new, at least in terms of a customer-facing and an internal approach, there's not a lot of consistency of the questions, which isn't a good thing. We probably need to find a way to be more consistent on the carrier side about asking the right questions. But really, at a big level, in utilizing that bottom-up approach, it's really about understanding, what are the models utilized, what are they being used for, why it's being done, and what the insured has done to, from a risk standpoint, to scenario plan. Because when you look at an agentic model from the top down, it's wildly it's wildly interesting, to deploy something without a lot of direction to complete a job that might otherwise take, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or 3 minutes versus 3 hours. It's tantalizing. And so, but the risk that goes along with it is what we're starting to see is that you really have to have a careful approach and do scenario planning, similar to what we do with ransomware right now in cyber. We don't just sit here and write policies and cross our fingers. We're looking at the totality of our book of business, geographies, customer sets, revenue sizes, and then running up to 50 different scenarios of 50 different ransomware scenarios on the book to see best and worst case scenarios. So we're trying to take that logic and impart that on our clients and saying, like, we just need to understand what type of risk assessment has been done in utilizing this. So not a ton of synchronicity, but I think we're going to get there very soon.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know, as you mentioned, it's constantly evolving. Agentic AI in particular is such a new space. So, things are always changing. And so maybe my next question is, it's a little too early to say, but I was curious if you're seeing insurance kind of evolving to include more AI-specific risk management services or loss prevention resources as well.
Yeah, we've been evaluating them for a while, and I think you're going to see more of them. We've been offering cyber risk management services now, and it's certainly since Westfield's inception, but the industry has been doing it for 24, 25 years now, and we've seen a huge benefit to especially our middle market and SME insureds, in that they might have access to a discounted tabletop exercise rate or a virtual CISO, whatever it may be, and they've been able to utilize that, and so. We've been thinking about we've been pushing that approach now on AI. And as you can imagine, there's lots of vendors in the space that are willing to do this now. We've seen a massive amount of growth. So we're still evaluating a lot of them. But it's hard to decide, frankly, what's best for our insureds at this point, because the utilization of AI is so different from one company to another. It's not choosing between a Dell computer, Apple, or whatever, 5 different computer manufacturers. There's just a lot of choice out there, and especially in how it's applied. With an AI model, every company, especially the larger you get, the more specific your AI intent is going to be and how you're using it. These are very complex, and it's not very repeatable from company to company. So trying to ascertain what tools or what software or what risk management platforms might work for our insureds broadly is very difficult, because we haven't seen a lot of consistency in how AI is deployed. And so I think until we get there, we're not going to get to a point where we can narrow down these 3 vendors could be very impactful.
Right. Yeah. As always with cyber and AI, when we have these conversations, it's constantly evolving. There are always new developments in the space. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. But this is such a timely topic. And as you mentioned, it's something that we haven't really seen before. So thanks for taking the time to break it all down and talk with me about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time.
That's all for this episode. Thanks to Jeff for joining me and to all of you for tuning in. Be sure to check out all of the other Insuring Cyber podcast episodes on insurancejournal.tv or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can always reach out to me at eblosfield@wellsmedia.com with any comments or questions. Stay tuned for a new episode next month. Talk to you next time.